Somebody said that.
All right,
Alright, guys, on my stream, I'm going to shut it down and host.
All right, I think we are live. So with that being said, welcome to the show, everybody. I guess we're calling it GameCast today. As you can tell, we have this fancy new layout here, which is, I guess, pretty awesome. Over here in this corner, we have Lano, and then right above me is Irish, and then over there is Skill.
What's up, guys?
And today we have one heck of a show. Bungie came out and released the weapons patch at the same time with the weekly update, and a lot of people are seemingly butthurt about it, and I can't fathom why. Now, there's some things on this weapons balancing patch that I guess if I play devil's advocate, I could see both sides, but most everything over the last 5 months, everybody has been complaining, oh, we need weapon balancing, we need this, nerf Thorn, nerf this, buff that. And they basically did it, but now everyone's butthurt. And especially the two things that I see the most, I guess, butthurtness over is Gallahorn and Blackhammer. And I don't know, maybe you guys can chime in on this. I don't see the problem with either. Gallahorn wasn't severely nerfed. They nerfed a slight nerf to the Wolfpack rounds, nothing else. And Blackhammer, they kind of took away the White Nail perk, but not really. They took how I perceive it, and again, chime in at any time if I'm wrong, is how I see what they did with Blackhammer is the White Nail perk now takes away from your ammo, but they added extra ammo, so you now have 18 shots in your ammo reserve. Obviously it's three in the mag, and if you get 3 consecutive crit shots, then it replenishes your ammo, but it does take from your ammo reserve. So I don't really see a huge problem with that because 95% of the community isn't skilled enough to hit 3 crit shots outside of stationary bosses.
Well, that's pretty much the whole point of that weapon and why you would want to carry it around. It has a small magazine, couldn't carry very much ammo, and it really didn't have the best scope for agile handling and easy shots. You pretty much had to stand still and rip it. It was definitely a very viable weapon for final bosses and mini bosses, and now that they're taking that away, kind of taking pretty much the main reason you would equip it away, where now Icebreaker would probably be a better option, or many of the other sniper rifles that are out there are now way better than Blackhammer, just because they take away that one little perk or that one little advantage that it did have. It has so many other disadvantages to it to start with that it's not going to be a very viable weapon unless you're really picking up a lot of special ammo to the point where you can be refilling it and whatnot. Otherwise, you might as well just be using something else. The Gallahorn nerf is interesting because Gallahorn is kind of the trophy weapon in the game, right? Everybody is seeking Gallahorn if they don't have it. And if you do have it, it's like a trophy item. Some people have a hard time destroying Gallahorns, you know what I mean? So it's one of these things where they're now lessening the things that are sought after, you know what I mean? This is one of these weapons that everybody is used on the default now. If you have it for certain fights, you just bring your Gallahorn because you know you're going to need it. And by them nerfing this, in their mind, they're opening avenues for us to use different weapons. But really and truly, what they're doing is just making that fight a little bit longer for everybody that's still going to take their Gallahorn into the fight, because that's how they know how to use the fight, or do the fight, you know what I mean? That's the weapon they use that particular fight with. So, I don't know, it's pretty interesting. The worst part about it to me is they're lessening weapons instead of just making other weapons more viable. Buffing other weapons instead of nerfing ones that we already have. And to me, you always want to be seeking something in a game, seeking better gear, seeking a better role or whatnot. They're now kind of taking away from that, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So.
Well, the thing with what you just said about lessening weapons and not bringing more up to that level, And that's something, I think Lano keyed on that in a couple podcasts ago, and I've seen it throughout Reddit and stuff. And it's something called power creep. And if you bring all the weapons up to, the level of one weapon, then you have all these super weapons, and then whenever you bring out new weapons, then you have to compete against that, and it gets to a point of where it becomes unrealistic, and it basically breaks the game, because you can't just keep building weapons on top of each other to a point where, you're getting down to like, 0.01 second, time to kill, and things like that. And it's just, you have to have that balance. So you have to bring weapons back down, and if you do it right, bringing all the weapons, or bringing, the overpowered weapons down, in a balance, then it makes it a little bit more viable, and you have a little bit more room to, move weapons up and down as you progress throughout the game's life cycle.
Well, I think there's so much I want to say. Like, I think ground level, this is linked to the problem that we've had since the beginning, is that the game has a split identity. I think that even if you don't even if you don't buff the other weapons, you're just prolonging the problem. Like, the weapons are always going to get stronger because we're getting stronger. Like, when you have PvE elements going over into PvP, it's just problematic. Like, we're always going to have this tension of like, oh, the weapons are getting too strong, or this one weapon's too strong, you got to back it back down. My main issue with this is, I don't get into specifics about, because we don't even know what's happening to the Galahorn yet. It's the perception. The nature of Destiny is about, you get these awesome guns and you play for hours to get them, and this perception of like, this gun that's been so awesome that you've been trying to get for all this time is now not quite as awesome. Or the Thorn in the Last Word. The problem with the Thorn in the Last Word is, it's just like, first of all, it really hurts my confidence in their ability to properly test. How did you not test TTK for either of those guns and not see that they're ridiculously strong in PvP in comparison to the rest of the guns? Like, how is that not caught in testing? It's almost like intentional. Like, we're going to let these guns get really, really strong, and then we're going to seem like we're going to come in and fix it, when they're the ones that buffed hand cannons to begin with. It just doesn't give me confidence in the future of the title, because if this is what's going to happen, and there was an interview with Luke Smith at E3 where he said they like changing it up. They like having that change-up of, like, certain weapons are better than others now, and I'm just like, that invalidates so much of what all the players do when they're playing the game. They invest all this time looking for, doing the Thorn Bounty, or farming for a Galahorn, and they finally get one leveled up, and they're like, yeah, I've got this weapon that everybody else has, and then it gets hit with a nerf. And it's like, no, it doesn't ruin the game, but it's just like, well, you just kind of invalidated all that I've worked on. That's my issue with it, is that I think it's primarily linked to a split identity, but it also fractures the nature of the game because of all you work to get those guns and level them up. They impact your success in the game, and to have that altered is really upsetting for lots of people.
You know, to play off that, I think Destiny in the beginning would have benefited from something similar to a public test realm you would see on WoW or any other major MMO where they can test this out, because it's obvious that there's quite a lack of internal testing, or at least something regarding the fact that, maybe they have every company has their own testers in-house, but multiple companies do use outside third-party companies to lend in testers. That gives them a better idea of what to do. Halo 5's case, they brought in actual professional players to test their weapons for PvP, to see where the balance lies, where the game mechanics lies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Destiny promoted itself as MMORPG, first big of its kind on Xbox. It's like, you need to have some type of public test realm of some sort for this kind of game, and their lack of testing, their resource in testing, is clearly showing here, or else you wouldn't be having so many of these issues throughout PvP and PvE with these weapons. Because that's what you catch in testing. That's what you catch.
Well,
I know some testers here in town, and for a different company, and they go over hours and hours on the same thing. That's how you figure out the statistical difference. That's how you figure out where this weapon draws off, where's this weapon's perks. It's just surprising.
I would think community testing or like MLG pro guy testing would be good for map balance and things of that nature. I find it very, very hard to believe they don't have a method by which they just test TTK, time to kill. Like, how do you not test for that and see, we just put guns in the game that are miles more efficient than all these other guns? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. You don't need a pro gamer to test TTK, you just need somebody to stand there and land a couple headshots and you're like, well, holy crap, this gun's ruthless in comparison to every other gun in the game. I do agree, I think testing's part of it. But I just don't think it gives players confidence in playing the game for a long time, because if this happens, it's like, why am I playing for a long time then?
Right. I think the way that they test it, great. I don't know how Bungie works, but my theory here is they have, let's say they have 100 testers, and basically their idea of testing is they just go and play the game. Like, they play the game as is, they go into Crucible and they play each other and figure out, okay, well, whatever, is this gun too OP, is this... And when you do that, it kind of hinders your ability, because you're basing it off of player skill and not weapon balance. Because one player could be really, really good using a hand cannon, and the other one could just suck miserably. So when you have that sort of skill imbalance, it offsets the weapon imperfection. And I think that's what they're overlooking. Now, a way to correct that would be to have some sort of player test realm where they invite, say, 1,000 or 10,000 players to come into their private test realm and be able to play the Crucible or certain PvE events with new weapon changes and balances and get a feel for it that way. Because when you have 1,000 to 10,000 testers, you get more data, more efficient and effective data than you would with just 100 testers. And that goes across any aspect of gaming. You're looking for glitches, weapon imbalances, map improficiencies, anything like that. The more people you have testing it, the more data and the more effectiveness you're going to get from it. And I think that's something that they need to probably introduce. And I know Bungie's weird and they're, all NSA, CIA about everything that they do, like there's some sort of government entity. And I think they need to open up a little bit more if they want to make these types of things better and more receptive from the community.
The testing, that's a no-brainer, honestly. But the fact of the matter is that you could see that being valuable on every aspect of the game. Think about PvE. What if we could break the game, find all the cheeses in the next raid a month before they want to debut it, so they can fix them, when they drop the raid. You know what I'm saying? Or
yeah.
But to me, they're trying to make the game more accessible by closing avenues, and that's not a good way to play the game. You need to be opening it up. They're trying to make trials right now. If you're winning 9-0 in trials last week and whatnot, you're gonna still be winning 9-0 after the patch drops. It's not gonna change your skill level. It's not gonna change your abilities. What it is gonna change is maybe the weapon you choose to bring in there now, because there's several weapons that haven't been touched at all, right? And now think about, this exotic's been nerfed. I'm going to slot in this legendary, and now this exotic becomes more valuable, and whatnot. So, to me, the thing that they're doing, though, is they're making it so that there's a better chance of you having a good time in trials, because you're not getting killed by Thorn every time you go in. Now you're just going to be getting killed by a mix of weapons. It's not automatically going to give a player that struggles in PvP or something a better chance. That's not really what it's doing here. But it is potentially taking away from the bling bling aspect of these weapons. And that's in a game where all you're doing is searching for gear. You can't do that. You know what I mean? You just can't shut these avenues down to make it better for the group, like everybody.
Well,
but it doesn't work that way.
See, the thing is hand cannons as a whole didn't need the blanket nerf that they got. Hand cannons outside of Thorn and Last Word were marginal at best. You really needed skill to use Up the Ante or Ill Will or any of these other hand cannons in PvP. You did. I tried, and I'm an average to slightly above average player, and I struggled with those. But when I used Thorn, I would decimate people. So Thorn is really what needed the nerf. Thorn and the last word. Other than that, they didn't need to do the blanket nerf. That was kind of a bit excessive. They needed to reduce Thorn's range, which they did through the blanket nerf. But then they decided to buff its damage over time, which I thought was kind of stupid. Because what they did is they took the damage over time and reduced it by 1/3. So I think it was at 7 ticks, or 7 points per tick. So, 1/3 of that, or 33%, I think is 4.6. So I don't know if they're going to keep it at 4.6 or round down or round up. I'm not sure. But we'll just assume it's 4.6 because that's 33% of 7. And so, but it becomes stackable up to 5. So my assumption and my take on that is if you hit 5 shots with that, doesn't matter where, then that stacks up to 20 points per tick, which is ridiculous. Or 23, I'm sorry, which is ridiculous. And I think they should have left the damage over time alone because it was already kind of OP, and now they just made it ridiculous. Yeah, I feel like they kind of took from one side and then
depending on
buffed
the range,
the other,
if you hit
and it's still
somebody 5
even.
times, they're going to be dead.
Well,
you know what I mean?
yeah, I understand
One tick of
that.
that DPS is all they're going to see.
But they need to clarify if it is 5, because it says whenever you hit 5 projectiles. So does that mean 5 projectiles on one target? So if you hit 3 projectiles on one target and then 2 on the other, does that other target get the 23 ticks per, 23 points per tick put on them? Because that, honestly, that would be absolutely ridiculous. Because at that point, Thorn is even more OP than it was originally. Because if you're shooting one person who doesn't even see you, and you're bam, 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 3 on them, they're dead, and then you switch over to the next dude, he's going to be dead in 2 shots because of the buffed damage over time. So it's like, what exactly did you really do? Because you said 5 projectiles. You didn't say per target or anything like that. So I have to perceive it as 5 projectiles across any number of targets.
Well, if it's per target, you can assume that really is just featured for Guardians that are going into their super, probably, with like overshield or something like that, so that you could take off the overshield, take down their shields, then take down their health, and you could probably get a couple ticks of crazy good DPS. If it's between multiple targets, that's pretty cool, because it's going to definitely reward accurate players much more than it used to. But then again, with all the drop-off and whatnot, it's gonna be a lot harder to get those cross the map kills and shots on people like you used to. So I'm assuming it's per target, and they just didn't iterate on that one particular detail. But if it is between multiple targets, that keeps its viability up, especially for Trials of Osiris, because a lot of people are grouped together closely, and you could, ping one, ping the other, and get some DPS stacked on them. But I don't know. That's interesting.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm absolutely 100% all for rewarding skilled players. Like, if you're skilled enough to get, headshots with, a basically, a hard-to-use gun, like what hand cannons are perceived to be going into this patch, then that's fine. You deserve the reward because of your skill. But I just don't want it to be to where anybody can just start spamming targets. And they did take away some of that spamming where you can't just rapid fire anymore. You have to have your controlled, paced shot, because from what I understand is if you try and spam it, your accuracy is just going to, drop off incredibly, which is great. But I just think, I don't know, they really should have worded it a little bit better, because it concerns me as to, I see the I don't want to call it a glitch, but workaround or whatever you want to call it that could potentially be from that, assuming it's verbatim.
Well, this is the problem I've talked about before. Like, just hearing you guys talk, like, that just got so in depth and detail and like heady. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, I don't want to even think about any of that. I just want to play. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know a lot of guys really get into the stats, and that's great that that's there for them. There's that complexity beneath the simplicity. It's like, well, it's a simple game. Go out and shoot people. The guns are straightforward, but then there's this complexity beneath. But the problem is it's just like, well, unless you're really into those stats or you're really into that, you're just never really going to feel like that there's this entry point for you. Because and this is what I've talked about before, you guys are kind of proving that point. PvP is always a mathematical equation of finding the quickest TTK. I don't care if it's Call of Duty or Battlefield or Destiny. That's what people do. That's what the top players do. They're like, what is the gun that I can most efficiently kill with? And that's the problem here, is that we're always going to be dealing with this. So now we've got this whole history of Trials of Osiris that, in my opinion, after these nerfs, it's like you can always sort of sully the reputation of someone. Like, well, you got all your 9-0s with those guns that were OP. I mean, Bungie nerfed them, so that meant they were OP. It's like you just kind of invalidated all those victories people got, because you're basically saying, yeah, these weapons aren't fair because you're nerfing them after you buffed them a couple of months ago. And so that's the nature of the game now. The nature of the game is that there's always going to be these months of insanity where one gun rises to the top and then everybody's scrambling to get it, and then once they get it, they dominate with it. Everybody's going to cry and whine, and then they're going to nerf it. And that's why I said it's just weapon whack-a-mole. It's just like, you can't have... I think if you've got something as highly competitive as Trials, it needs to be preset gear, or at least disallow exotics. And then, if you really want to have the exotic guns, and you want to have that epic nature of, like, all this cool stuff I got in PvE I can now take in PvP, I think a melded PvP, PvE game mode like Warzone and Halo is a good idea, because it can soften the impact of those guns. Like a Galahorn or a Thorn isn't going to have the impact in a game mode that's bigger, in a game mode that's got like a real spongy AI boss. You're gonna make those choices. Well, do I want to use my Galahorn on this guy, or do I want to save it for the the player controlled enemies? So I just think that if they don't make big changes to PvP, this is always going to be the nature of PvP. There's always going to be guns that rise to the top, everybody cries and whines, and then they get nerfed. The PvE guys, like me, are going to get infuriated, because they're going to be like, oh great, another gun that I worked hard to find, to level up, is now not quite as good, like the Suros, because, oh, it was getting used too much in PvP. So, that to me is why I say it hurts confidence in the future. Like, I don't have confidence in Bungie to manage their game, because it just feels like a beta. Like, we're in this paid beta where they're like, well, we're trying to tweak it, guys, sorry. And I also think that it hurts loyalty, because the more time you put into the game and the decisions and the guns and leveling up, some people shrug it off. They're like, whatever, I'll just adapt and use new guns. Other people, it's like, are you kidding me? I finally got a Galahorn and you're going to nerf it? Even if the nerf's minor, it's about perception. The perception is that you are devaluing what I have worked on hours. Like, that's the beauty of the game, right? Is it's addicting, and you invest all those hours. That makes it sting more.
Yeah, I think a solution to this would be if Bungie came out with like a hardcore Crucible mode, to where you have the same map playlist, like Control and Rumble and Skirmish and all this stuff, but it would be only certain types of gear, only certain weapons were allowed, and that's it. So it would cater to the hardcore players who have these weapons, and it would separate the I guess the casual gamers could still play your basic PvP, but the guys that are hardcore and want to use these specific weapons or want to do specific things, they could go into a mode separate for them. Like, for me, like if there was an exotics only or legendaries only Control or Skirmish or whatever, or where a game mode where you could only use hand cannons or things like that, then I think it would give everybody something to do, because then you would take the hardcore players out of the basic Crucible pool and allow those people that either aren't that good or don't have the time to gear grind and weapon grind, they can still play the Crucible and have fun just playing casually, and then those hardcore players can come out with their Thorns or whatever weapons OP at that time, and then just do that. I think that would kind of curb some of the whatever you want to call it,
The slanted nature of the game. Like,
Yeah.
I talked about that with Trials of Osiris. It was paid content. People paid for that, and there's no entry point for them if they don't have a Thorn or a Last Word or a really, really solid team. There's no entry point for them, so they bought something that they essentially can't really play and get the full access to it. So make it free. Iron Banner. Put way better cool stuff in Iron Banner, and all the sweaty hardcore guys can go nuts in there with all the perks and benefits of their weapons. Let them have at it, and if you do something paid like Trials, do preset weapons, do something to make it where everybody feels like they've got a shot as long as they've got a team.
Yeah, I think there should have been 2 versions of Trials. Hardcore Trials, which is for teams only, and then Basic Trials, which is matchmaking. It's not that hard to do.
We've seen in other games though, where you split off your PvP gear from your PvE gear to make it fair, right? And it just seems like to me it seems like that's just more and more needed in Destiny as time goes by. Because first off, there's no tiering to the weapons. There's no reason that Fatebringer should still be one of the most, or the best, like, legendary pistol in the game, right? You know what I mean? Because that was from vanilla Destiny, right? In other games, as patches come by, the most recent weapons should be the strongest weapons. And you leave things behind, and you keep seeking out new things. They've kind of nullified that out. And there's no... With the RNG, there's lots of problems with grinding for weapons, and supposedly it's better, but it's still not, your time is valuable as a gamer, and it has to reward you a certain amount. You have to get a certain amount of gratification out of it just for playing, right? So when you take these little tweaks and the little perks of what you've earned or what you grinded all these hours for away, it just, to me, it makes the game all the way around less like lackluster, really. You know what I mean? And the worst part is that the majority of us are still going to keep playing, and we'll voice our opinions, and we'll make videos, and we'll do these casts, but until Bungie sees a hit in the money, in the wallet, they're going to keep going with the protocol because it's been working. They're one of the most successful games on both consoles. So go ahead, Lano.
I was going to say, that's why I want to come back to the timing of the launch of this, that I think it's going to be very bad if it really fails to deliver. Because if you're a brand new player and you go through that that sting of the realization that this is a real grindy game and it takes forever, and I talked about this last week, I think, about how it's the linear nature of the game is short-circuited by the RNG loot system because you can't advance unless certain things happen and certain things drop. Now they've kind of fixed that, so people are going to be able to get to 34 with the House of Wolves stuff simply by playing and buying armor. So they've kind of fixed that. You're not going to be playing a raid and waiting on RNGs to drop the right gear so that you can level up. So the linear nature of the game won't be as short-circuited. But if all these new players buy the game and experience that same sort of sting and disappointment, then that tidal wave of new games is going to hit. And if they have less time invested, all of us have lots of time invested, so it's harder to walk away. But the people that just bought it and they're like, what? I got to, and if it just doesn't jive with them, the Taken King's just got to deliver. It's got to kind of connect all the dots and feel like a full, complete game. Or new players are just going to be like, this isn't worth it. And then you're just slowly losing veterans. So I think that is going to hurt them monetarily. Like I said, I think they need to delay it to the first quarter next year and deliver this during a game drought so that it feels more satisfying to new players and it gives them more time to add more content. Because I'm concerned about the amount of content we're going to get because we walked through those bullet points last week, and I just don't think there's a lot there. I really don't.
Yeah,
especially, and you know, we've talked about this before, and Lana brought up the point is, you know, over time you'll lose veterans if you keep it up like this, and, well, you've got a month until Halo 5 after the Taken King drops, and for PvP, let's just talk PvP here for a second, all the veterans are going to drop Destiny for the way they're doing things. It's like, it's very hard in general for any game like this that's having these issues, that's really disappointing after a major hype, doesn't seem to be able to fix, can't seem to go the right way with the game, and then drop content before one of the biggest next-gen years of video games in a long time. I mean, it's nothing but week after week after week after week after week.
Or do they know?
Until December.
Do they already know that their product isn't going to stack up? Is that why they're dropping it when they are? You know what I mean?
Well,
that's
it
what.
Could be,
that's
but
that's
they're not going to get as much money out of a September launch as, like Lana proposed, they would like a spring launch when there's nothing around.
Well, here's the problem with that, and again, I'm just going to play devil's advocate. If they wait until wait till spring of next year, the problem is the lack of content already. Most people are burnt out with House of Wolves as it is. So if you're looking for new content and then you have all these new games, you're likely to just lose people, period, because of all the new games and the lack of content. So it's almost like they're in check. You know, they have to put something out just to keep something going.
That's a good point,
and it's like, you know, it's just basically they're just putting it out there because they have no other choice. There is no other choice. If you wait till spring, you risk losing everybody. If you put it out now, you risk only losing some.
Right.
So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where
you're gonna lose the same amount of people, but they got $30 more or $40 more.
Yeah, it's like
right.
If you put out, you know, enough content, yeah, you're gonna keep some people, but the reality is you're gonna lose some because there's new games. It's a fact. It happens with every game that comes out. So, and is what happens now is they put out their content for, you know, this fall, you know, amidst all these other games, and it depends on how much content is to how bad of a hit they take. If there's a decent amount of content, let's say that there is a good amount of content to satisfy everybody. Reality is they're going to play it for a month or two, but they're also going to play other games in between. So it could benefit them in the fact that people are going to play it longer because they're going to be occupied with other games. So, you know, if they're going to play Halo, I'm going to play Halo 3 nights a week, then I'm going to hop on Destiny on the weekend with my friends. It's going to take them longer to get through the content than it would be if they were just the only game. So in that aspect, it could fudge the numbers for Bungie to say, hey, look, you know, people are playing our games longer than if they were just the only game out and everybody just kind of, you know, burned through it real quick. So, and again, it's kind of fudging the numbers because, you know, there's other games out, so, you know, they're spending less time on it, but per numbers basis, there's more people logging on to play it, which comes back to the whatchamacallit, the graphs that they showed us for, you know, the update and the weapons and all that. And I read it on Reddit. At first, when I looked at them, you know, on the update, I was like, oh, okay, this, you know, looks, you know, seemingly legit. I understand it. And in fact, I had no clue until it was posted on Reddit, and the guy who does the, you know, the weapon stats for PvP and stuff, which I make my videos based off of, he posted something, and it made a lot of sense, because he's talking, the charts that they used to show you the weapon imbalances or whatever aren't in fact even remotely close to what they're comparing it to. They're comparing usage or what's equipped and not what's being used to be killed. So, you know, as an example, they're saying that Thorn was equipped 25% of the time in Iron Banner. Okay, but how much of that was actually killed? And, you know, 25%, the next best, I think, was like 15. So it's like there was a huge gap between Thorn and anything else. The next best, I think, was Red Death. But they only showed Iron Banner. So it's like, okay, so you showed Iron Banner. Okay, let's say only 10% of the people actually play Iron Banner. So you're showing 25% of the 10% that play it, which doesn't represent the whole community. Okay? So if they were to show more Crucible, you know, what they showed doesn't represent what they're saying. And it's kind of frustrating because it's like, I know you want to say something, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like they were taking the similar route they took with auto rifles. They were more or less saying there's overuse. Like, this is a disproportionate use of these weapons. I didn't get the impression. Now, they did mention that the last word had the quickest TTK in the game. They mentioned that. But I got the impression more, because they said the same thing with auto rifles. They were talking about the percentage of usage was so lopsided. And I remember Luke Smith saying that in that interview at E3. He's like, we kind of want to have that good representation and mix it up so that other guns kind of get their day in the sun. So I think maybe he read too much into it. I didn't read it real closely. I just looked at the numbers and then scrolled to the nerfs. So I don't know if they were trying to like mislead us with the numbers. It was just like clear these guns are the preferred guns. You're almost an idiot if you don't use them. I mean, you can watch, Gathalion, or you can watch GameSager go 31-0 with the last word. I mean, it's just like you don't really need stats to know the top-notch players are using these guns, and just nobody stands a chance. I mean,
Right.
31-0, and he was streaming and like looking away from the screen and chatting and stuff. Like, it was like he wasn't even playing. You know what I mean? He
Well,
goes
I mean,
31-0.
I'm not gonna say that I know GameSager, but we've played against him in Titanfall, and he is an exceptionally well player. We played against him in the Titanfall Championship tournament, and he is an exceptionally well player. So I mean, I could see that coming from him.
Right,
if it was just one of us, that'd be pretty impressive.
That low of a TTK in his hands, and everybody's just butter before him. Like, nobody stands a chance.
Yeah.
And I don't like. I think that's like the perception is part of the problem. You see guys like him and Gathalion just mercilessly laying waste to people. Like on Gathalion's one, I mean, he's using a thorn and a shotgun. It's just like the other guys aren't even playing. And then I think people think, oh, well, that's what's going on. So when they get killed by the thorn or they get killed by the last word, they're like, oh, it's not fair. So it's a perception thing. Yeah. I mean, obviously they needed nerf. They're super, super powerful. But I think there were ways to do it without nerfing them. I think there were ways to take away their impact and influence without nerfing those guns. But again, it comes back to the fact that they buffed them. They buffed hand cannons to begin with, and they created this problem, which I think is the larger issue.
Like I said, hand cannons as a blanket didn't need a nerf. It was just Thorn and just last word, and it really came down to just range, because what happens is you have short, medium, and long range. And when a weapon can hit in all three of those categories, then there's a problem. It should only be able to hit in at least two. So Thorn should be close range, superior close range, and kind of medium. There should be no long range aspect to any hand cannon at all, and there is, and that's where the problem lies. The problem doesn't lie in damage or the damage over time. It lies in range. If I'm using an auto rifle at halfway across the map, I should own that Thorn. That Thorn should not be able to get me unless they are highly skilled. And that's where the problem is. You don't have to be highly skilled to, halfway shoot across the map with a hand cannon. And I think either Bungie didn't see that, or they didn't care, or were just lazy, and then put out this blanket nerf like, okay, well, people are saying that it needs to be nerfed. We don't really understand why, but here you go. We're just going to do some shit and see what happens. And
that's why the perception is a problem, like I keep saying, because they took so long. Like, that was a point I made in my video. It was like, what took so long? Like, you had to know after 2 weeks of Trials of Osiris that 9-0 teams were using those weapons most of the time. I mean, I'm sure there's guys who are like, we didn't use them. Like, fine. Most of the teams were using them. Mm-hmm. And you could have done something. You could have been like, hey, we see there's a problem here. We're going to disallow exotics for the time being. Or, they shouldn't have just cranked out a weapon balance, because that would have been sloppy and probably created 10 other problems. We know these systems are interlinked. Like, when they tried to do the heavy ammo glitch, it took them forever because it was attached to all these other systems. Okay, fine. Development is nuanced and delicate. I get that. So don't do that. But disallowing exotics would have been easy. But you wait and you wait and you wait. And then this isn't even coming until the Taken King comes out. Right. So between now and the Taken King, they're still going to be shredding people in the trials. Right. And then trials is just going to go like this. And you're going to have the same sweaties in there just dominating and nobody else playing.
Right.
And that perception is just going to get continued, which will then further well, you won trials because you had the better. Like, robbing people of, like, GameSager and Goth, they're beast players, and people are going to be like, well, you only won because of the weapon. You're, like, taking away from their skill in a way.
Right. I think...
I want to bring up something real quick. We've talked a lot in the past about the guns, the weapons, the overpower, and we talked a little bit about the classes. And with Taken King coming out, and this patch is coming out for the Taken King, right? Right now, the general consensus is that the Hunter class is completely OP, specifically the Blade Dancer class. And now we have 3 new classes coming out, which one could be easily OP over the rest. It's, you know, you can nerf the guns, and the guns are a big part of it, but I think they got to start taking a look at the classes now too, because it's extremely hard to kill a Blade Dancer when they're popped. I mean, and you're looking at half the team is dead in about 10 seconds if they're close enough together, and that's an issue in balance that they've just completely ignored for all this time. And you know, we have things like the solar hammer coming out, we have that gravity bow coming out, we've got the lightning for the warlock coming out, and if you're gonna balance the guns, I almost feel like you gotta balance the classes too, because now because you know, we've talked a lot about perception, and the perception is right now is if you want a good PvP class, you go to Hunter.
Yeah.
And that's where you go to, and that's where you stick to. Like, if you were just watching streams of Destiny, of PvP, you would see, it was like, oh man, only Hunters can really, like, truly dominate. I mean, Titans can have their day every once in a while, and Warlocks can be a little bit annoying with their self-res. But overall, it's like, once they see that Blade Dancer pop it, it's just like, he's invincible. Gun. He's invincible, and then on the other hand, you get a one-shot, one-kill perk. You know, you can't just balance one section of the game and ignore the other. And you need to analyze both the guns and the classes.
Well, I get the impression that that's what they are doing with the subclasses. I mean, I think a Titan's, I always call it the Hulk Smash. I think the Titan's Hulk Smash nullifies Blade Dancer. As long as you're listening, it's very easy to do. I mean, I am not a PvP player, and I was down 3v1, and I saved the day with the Hulk Smash. I mean, they were all coming for me, so I think that nullifies Hunter pretty well. Warlock's basically a turd in PvP unless self-res is there's a time to use it, but in trials you're just going to get probably 3v1 unless the timing's right. So I think the lightning that they're giving the Warlock looks to be very PvP focused from the looks of it. I mean, it's all about, like, kind of similar to the Blade Dancer. You activate it, and then you get to just kind of go and just annihilate. The Titan's Hammer Throw, we'll just have to see. I think his Hulk Smash is the clear preferred PvP move, because if you're trying to, you know, play Control or Trials, that's kind of your panic of like, oh my gosh, I've got to, you know, stop a Blade Dance. So I think they are trying to bring that balance, because you are right. I think Hunter is 9 out of 10 times who people pick to go PvP with because of how he's built.
I think that with the new, if we're talking about new subclasses, I'm really interested in the Titan's hammer throw or whatever, because I don't want to say it's going to be OP because we really don't know, but the fact that from what it seems like, you can throw, I'm not going to say an unlimited number of hammers, but probably a good amount. If it's more than 3, it's a good amount. And it's one shot, one kill, and I assume that the hitbox is going to be quite large, like it is with Golden Gun. You know, Golden Gun, as long as you aim from their toe to their head, it's a one-shot kill regardless. I assume that's how it's going to be with the hammer. So in that aspect, the hammer should be the equivalent of a Golden Gun, and that makes it pretty freaking good, honestly. So I'm excited to see that one and see how that's going to play out. You know, I guess whether it's going to be OP or not depends on how many hammer throws you actually get.
Well, in the footage that they showed, there's at least one sequence where they show there's 2 Titans that try to use it on each other, and the one guy misses. His hammer goes next to him and goes past him, and then he gets hit with the hammer that was thrown at him. So it does look like you've really got to kind of line it up, and you can't just keep throwing it. It looks like it's like a throw and like a wait for it to come back kind of a thing.
Huh.
Now in PvE it's a little different because there's mobs, and every time it hits, I think it resets. So yeah, we'll have to see, but it's definitely the hitbox didn't look as forgiving because he throws it right past the guy.
Huh.
Again, it's kind of a cinematic setup, right? So we don't really know. It could play very differently on the field.
Well, since we're kind of getting skewed away from the topic at hand here, is I want to talk about the fusion rifle nerf that they did. They've already been nerfed, so it's like a double nerf. Like, I don't understand the concept here. Like, they made the charge time even slower, and it's like the charge time was already ungodly slow. Like, it'd take a year for it to charge up, so in order to use a fusion rifle, you had to be Jesus and be able to predict where they're going to go and where they're going to be in order to use it. Me personally, that's all I play is PvP, so I can't remember the last time that I'd been killed by a fusion rifle. And with what they did to him, I don't foresee ever being killed by a fusion rifle, because it's just, they like took this gun and then they curb stomped it and then they put it back together just so they could curb stomp it again. And I'm like, I don't fathom what their thought process was on the fusion rifle nerf. Like,
and this is another blanket nerf across the board. Exotics, legendaries across the board. This is another blanket nerf.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it because when they were talking about it in the update, it sounded like they were about to get a buff, because he said when we did that to the fusion rifles last time, we noticed that everybody just started using shotguns, and I was like, oh, okay, well, they're gonna fix fusion. No, they're nerfing it. Like, I was totally confused by that. It just bewildered me, because I don't even play PvP, and I switched to shotgun. I use the Swordbreaker now because all my fusion rifles are turds. Like, they don't have that nice. They were perfect for taking down a wizard's shield from far away, because you could really line it up, and if you move the gun up and down as you fired, you got like a nice straight line. They expanded the cone, and it's just like, this is a piece of crap now.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know what they were thinking there. With all the nerfs and the buffs that they're putting out with this, so far the only ones that make sense are the auto rifles, which obviously they were a much needed buff. I think they probably could have done a little bit better, but I still think that they did all right. I hope that they do the damage drop-off, or, the damage over distance. As long as that's right, then it'll be fine. From what they showed, like their little thing, they showed it with, in what I assume is a PvE setting. I don't know. It looked like a Halo 2 map with a fallen captain, and then they shot him, and it was 19, and then he was like 5 feet back, and it was 15. And I'm like, if that's the actual distance, that's going to be pretty shitty. Because that's really not fair to auto rifle users, because auto rifles should be like the beast in all aspects of medium, close medium to long medium. In all aspects, auto rifles need to be really good. I understand that they can't be good in long range, even though an auto rifle technically is okay. Like, it shouldn't have any long range capabilities, because that comes back to crossing all three planes, and you can't do that. Okay, so you have a close range, which I assume auto rifles are a close range backup. Okay, their medium range should be really solid. Once you get to medium long range, then you could start the drop off. But the way they worded it is, it starts at the player, and the damage over distance drops off considerably over the longer distance. I understand it, but they need to really specify what those distances are. And then this comes down to transparency within the company. Is they need to be more transparent about what they're doing and what they're saying. Like, if they hear our complaints, they need to acknowledge it. Be like, hey, we hear your complaints that Thorn is OP. These are some ideas that we're working on. Then they could get feedback. Oh, well, that idea is stupid. This idea, if there's a million of us, and then eventually somebody's going to have an idea that they didn't think about, or something like that, and then we could all literally just work together to make the game better for how we want it and how the company perceives it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm all for that, but I think that's where I think the community might just start to get a little worn out, because you're like, oh, the auto rifle buff is necessary, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but they created that problem. Like, what, you know what I mean? It's like, that's why the confidence is just dropping. Because House of Wolves reveal, I was like, oh, they're listening to community, they're adding all these changes. And then it drops, and I'm like, it creates 25 more problems. Like, the rewards suck, there's no incentivization to play. Like, it's almost like the loot pools of House of Wolves should have been included in the launch game, because raid gear is better than all of it. You know what I'm saying? It just, the game feels confusing to me. And it's so, I think you're right. That's what they need to do. They need to listen to the community. But I think if this is what it is, if it's this back and forth of, this is good now fusion rifles suck. Well, now this is better and this is fixed. It's just always going to feel like this shell game that really starts to feel like a sinister sort of, well, this is going to keep people playing and grinding longer than they would if everything was just sort of built well. Because if it was built well, you'd get to the level and the guns that were right, and you'd be like, okay, now what? Like, what am I supposed to do now? But if the guns and the best guns keeps this, it's like this elusive sort of dream of like, well, I never arrive as a character until the next DLC. Well, then you're just going to keep playing because you're like, well, I got to get as many weapons as I possibly can because this gun here is crap, but it might be an all-star in a couple months. And that's my worry, is that's what's going to start to feel like, is a shell game to keep people playing, and we never know what's going to be good and what's going to be crap. And then all your time investments are invalidated, all your choices are uprooted, and you feel like you're just along for their ride, and just enjoy it while you're at the top, because, you know, your guns might be turned into rubbish with the next update. Not rubbish, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but you know what I'm saying, like, it feels like they just won't leave your stuff alone, like, you know.
Yeah,
well, Destiny is definitely shown that, you know, they'll make a grind for lack of content. You know what I mean? And that's kind of, once again, what we're seeing here is, well, now these guns aren't so good, these guns are a little bit better. And the problem with that is once again, we're going to be stuffing our vaults full of junk and then just waiting for it to be valuable one day. That's no fun. You know, I'd rather work towards something. There's an interesting point where when Mythoclast was the best weapon in the game, and it was OP and it was slaying everybody in PvP and stuff, there was more people trying to play Vault of Glass hard mode to get that weapon. There was an incentive, right?
Right.
And then they nerf it, right? And anybody that didn't have it, it was that incentive. There was no real big deal anymore about going and getting that weapon, right? And I'm one of those people that was like, well, I don't need it to win, so I'm not going to go through that hardship of going doing hard mode every week with the boys, you know what I mean? And then Necrochasm came out, and they're like, all right, well, we're gonna make sure that this gun isn't OP. Well, it's just horrible. There's no real reason to use it. And now they're giving Necrochasm a buff, I see, with the auto rifle buff, plus it's getting its own little exotic buff. But there's no incentive to go out and get the big bad weapons anymore. And I guarantee you they saw a drop-off in hard mode runs when Vex got the nerf. And when you lose players on both facets of the game, PvP and PvE, based on nerfs, that's not good. Or when you don't satisfy anybody, you only are putting band-aids on the smaller issues. So, well, I don't know.
Well, Indeed said... Go ahead, Irish. You haven't said much. Go.
Yeah. Real quick here, because we were on the talk of communication, you know, community transparency here. Like, what do you think about the gentleman from Reddit being hired as the new community manager for Destiny?
There's
a
lot of...
Is that really going to be something,
I mean...
you know, where they start talking to the community, or is this kind of like an Activision, Bungie kind of PR move to say, hey, we're going to involve someone in the community in Bungie now, and then if we don't hear from him, it's going to look like this is just like a small PR stunt to say, like, okay, we're bringing someone into the community, but as we know and as we figured out, Activision kind of has a muzzle on what a lot of Bungie can or will not say.
Well,
is it going to be even worth a damn that a community member is now a community manager for Destiny? I mean, is anything going to come of it? Is this a stunt?
Here's the thing: is we can put on our tinfoil hats for a minute. because there's a few ways you can go with this. Is one, games across all boards have more than one community manager, or some people call them community developers. Bungie now has, as far as I know, 3. Okay, they had 2 already. You just never heard from anybody other than Deej. But like games like For Honor, they have 4 already off the bat. The game hasn't even been released. They have 4 community developers or community managers. So it's nothing new to have multiple community managers or representatives, however you want to call it. I think them hiring Cosmo is probably pretty smart on their part, because he was I think he was the creator of the Destiny subreddit, which is really, really huge. So he has a really solid tie-in with the community. He knows what the community wants already because he is the part of the community. So I think them hiring him, he already has that, community developer, I guess, resume, because of what he does with Reddit. So he's already got that aspect down. Them bringing him in is just more like, it's just kind of, I guess they probably needed an extra person because they're so big now. It helps to spread the populace around. Now, what the tinfoil hat people are saying is that he's basically a meat shield. Saying that, he's getting hired in to take the brunt of the negativity while they figure everything out. I don't really think it's that way, because I think, again, the populace is spread between everybody, including the negativity. So I think, hiring him isn't really a bad thing, and I guess it's more of a good thing, honestly, because he came from the community, so it's like they can almost go to him and be like, what do we need to fix? What's the problem? And he can say that on the spot because he knows. He knows what we all want. He knows what we all think. So I think bringing him in is more of there's a lot that we need to fix, and we need your help kind of thing.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, we could get real speculative, but I think it makes sense because Luke Smith has said this a couple of times, and I believe Deej has as well. They both use the same phrase, so this is like corporate Bungie speak. They're like, the genius of millions or something is better than, our small team or something like that. They've used a phrase like that, like the genius of millions. And so I think part of their business plan and development plan is to funnel in all this community input, because if you think about John Hobson, the guy who presented at GDC 2015 when he explained the loot cave and why they made changes, John Hobson has a PhD in brain psychology and human behavior, and he works for them because they studied player behavior and made a lot of decisions with the game about that. Like, how much are you willing to do before you get tired of it is essentially what's going on, right? Like, it's very addictive. GameSpot has a fantastic video about Destiny and how it's basically formatted around the psychology of gambling and why it's so addictive. So I think if you consider all of that, right, and then they have built into their method of the madness of development is, okay, we need another funnel and another ear to just bring in all this data about what the community thinks, what's the behavior, what's going on. Then they can continue then to use that, I think, and leverage it to either make changes or updates. Because think about how they presented House of Wolves. The House of Wolves stream, the one where they did with Broman, okay, 20 to 30% of that stream was them playing, and then 60% of it was them going back to the tower and literally listing off what would amount to what you would think would be boring stuff. But it was like, here's all these things we've heard for the community that we're fixing, okay? So everybody got so excited. Because the gameplay in Destiny can't get much more exciting than it already is. Like, you're going to see it, okay, there's bosses, there's gunfights, great, 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 great. But they use the community feedback to sort of fuel, like, oh, I got excited. I was like, oh my gosh, they're listening to us. I would think that's why he's been hired. Because they can really start to generate more of those Twitch streams where they're like, we're listening to you. We're adding all these changes, like, don't look behind the curtain. And you're like, I'm going to keep playing and buying DLC, and and I think that's where these weapon nerfs come from. It's like, everybody forgets they created the problem, but then people are like, well, we've been asking for these nerfs. Good on Bungie for doing it. And it's just like, well, they created the problem to begin with. So I think that's the move here. I don't know him. He's probably a great guy. I don't think he's going to be a corporate sellout. I think he's going to be a funnel of for information to come in to help them with development.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the problem is that with look at some of these other games. Call of Duty, it absolutely fucking blows, but they're open with their community. That's why people keep coming back, is because they will say, hey, okay, well, listen, John 317-Q, we heard you. We're gonna look at this. And games like Titanfall, it doesn't have that huge of a community anymore, but they will reach out to the community and be like, hey, we heard you, we're going to do this for Titanfall 2. And the same thing with Halo. And all these other games, they acknowledge the community. They're like, okay, we heard you, here's some things that we're working on, or here's a reason why we haven't done this yet. And Bungie, they're just like, we're going to throw smoke at you, and then you can turn it into rainbows and buttercups and whatever you want. And they don't have a real connection or relationship with the community. And then this is why people, pitchfork and riot and things like that, is because there's no directive. There's no, listen, we're working on this, but it's going to take some time. There's coding issues, there's this, there's that, so just give us some time, and things like that. If they would just come to us and say, hey, we can't nerf this right now because here's why. We're working on this, doing this. We are working on it, but we want to make sure we get it right. Look at The Division. They've delayed the game for over a year, and they keep saying we want to make sure it's right. Oh, we found this might not work very well, so we're gonna postpone it, or we're gonna do this. And people were receptive. Speaking of The Division, people were very receptive. Like, okay, thank you. We appreciate that. That's more than any other developer has ever done. And it's true. Not many developers are willing to, say, hey, we fucked this part of the game up, so we're going to fix it, and it's going to cost us a year. Okay, well, that's probably honestly going to bring them more sales than it would have had they just, launched it out there and was like, hey, we'll scotch tape it later, And I think that other game developers, Bungie, could learn a little bit from that. And, if they were a little bit more transparent and a little bit more open about what they're actually doing behind those curtains, I think people wouldn't be so upset, and there would be more patience and more confidence in Bungie, but they don't.
Well, then, we'll have a lot to talk about, because apparently there's updates coming. They're going to have to do something. Like, we've got 2 months until it comes out, and they keep saying, more information's coming, more information's coming. I'm telling you, that bullet point list they gave me, I'm not going to self promote, but I've already written about it. I'm very worried about the amount of content we're going to get.
It was way too vague of a bullet list in general.
Yeah, it was very, very vague. Well,
it was almost like a PR company wrote it up just so there was no. It had that type of feel. Like,
yeah.
Well, we're getting pretty close on time here, guys. Lano, do you want to go over what you're streaming next week?
Yeah, this week I've been having a lot of fun with Elder Scrolls Online. I'm on my second character, and that's been a lot of fun. That's typically my go-to daily stream game right now. But Tuesday, a really cool indie title coming out, Tembo the Badass Elephant. I don't know if you've guys seen it. It looks pretty cool. It's like it's launched on Xbox One. It's like a side-scroller, cartoonish. Those classic side-scrollers always pull me in. Ori and the Blind Forest, Rayman Legends, Guacamelee, such fun titles. So I'll be playing that Tuesday. I'm going to turn Wednesday into my Destiny day. I got back into Destiny the other day, and I was amazed at how much fun I had. I think when you step away and come back, it's fresh, and was just love it. The prison is still my favorite thing to do. It's just the burns, the randomness, the different. You get to fight all the enemies. So that'll be this week. Elder Scrolls Online, Tembo, and Destiny, kind of a mixed bag. And then we're getting close to when all the new games come out, and I'll be doing that. I try to do that on my stream on YouTube, play the new games so you don't have to, kind of a thing, so people can check them out there. So that's what I'll be doing this week.
You must be pretty excited for Cupheads from Xbox for the side scroller wise, huh?
Yes. We don't. Do we have a launch date for that yet? I don't think we do.
This fall, I believe, sometime.
Just the generic fall. Yeah, I don't think I've seen a launch date for it yet. Fall. Okay. Yeah, I'm excited for that one. That one's awesome.
From what I heard, it was pretty much incredibly polished on the floor at E3. One of the more polished games on E3. So.
One of the guys on the stream. Well, one of the guys on the stream was asking about, his name's Connor MLB. He asked, they've talked about the bow and arrow, or the AK glorified scout rifle. I'm not sure if he's talking about the Hunter Super, because he says, I just think it's being too hyped as a unique badass weapon, but it looks like it's going to be a reskinned scout rifle. I'm not sure if he's confusing the Super with an in-game weapon, because there is no weapon that I'm aware of that's called a bow and arrow other than the Hunter's Void Bow, which, if that's what you're talking about, Connor, that's actually nowhere near anything like that. It's basically a support class. Both the Warlock and the Titan have support classes. The Self-Res and the Void Bubble, or just the Bubble, are both support classes, but the Hunter doesn't have one. So the Void Bow is basically the support class, which basically it tethers down the enemy, either a PvP player or players, or PvE enemies, and basically it allows your other teams to do the DPS on them while they're tethered down and can't move or shoot. So that's what that is. It's basically the Hunter's version of the support, which is what it was lacking. So now it can be more of a support rather than DPS.
Yeah. Yeah, but to answer your question, Irish, I did play the Batgirl DLC. About an hour and 45 minutes, very linear. And then I went and got all the collectibles. So getting the collectibles, I think it took me like 2.5 hours. In the grand scheme of the season pass, it's only $7 per piece. So basically my conclusion on my review was, if you're like a completionist and you want to do everything in Batman, go ahead and get it. Get the season pass so you get the discount. But I couldn't really give my stamp of approval and say, yeah, if you buy it a la carte for $10, it's worth it. Hopefully, in hindsight, when people look at the season pass, they're like, yeah, it was kind of short, but the season pass gets better, because I know in August they're just giving us free skins, season pass holders, like the Michael Keaton skin and the Michael Keaton Batmobile. So that's pretty exciting. It was really short and very linear, and I think that's a danger when you have such a good game. Arkham Knight was so good and so expansive and open, and then having a very linear, constricted, short thing, it doesn't look good up against the game itself. So it was like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for me.
All right.
Well, that's probably about it. I think we covered everything that we had planned to talk about. With that being said, for those of you watching, for next week, if you have any game or any topic that you want us to cover, or that you think we should look at, our Twitters are literally all right here. So hit one of us up and let us know, if there's something that you want us to look into or discuss for an upcoming week or something, and we'll gladly take a look at it and bring it to the show. We're always looking for something, and whatever you guys have, we want to talk about and hopefully answer your questions. And with that being said, we thank you guys for coming out. Genuinely appreciate it. It's always fun. And we will see you guys next week at 11 p.m. Eastern, right here. Same bat time, same bat channel.
That's right.
And does anybody have anything they want to say in closing? Anything?
Not I.
No?
Thanks
All
for
right.
coming out, guys.
Well, we're good to go. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you guys next week and or on Twitter throughout the rest of the week. See you.